Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. So what makes a card rare? Well, other than the manufactured rarity of today's modern sports card hobby, which I'll get into further in this video, there are several factors and it really depends on a few things. If you go back far enough to say 1909, 1910, 1911, with the T205s, T206s, and T207s, you have the dissolution of, say, the American Tobacco Company, but then you also have the players who may be traded or are sent down to the minors, or in the case of the American Tobacco Company itself, you have specific brands that have a start date and a cutoff date. And so not all players are known to have every single brand associated with the American Tobacco Company or the T206. Another key factor in the rarity of some of our sports cards is the economy. And what better way to demonstrate this than this card right here? This is a 1933 George C. Miller, and I did a 21-page article on this specific set, and I included a lot of dimensions, if you will, to the article that you're not going to find anywhere else. So you might want to go to my website and read up further. But what I'm going to do is actually mention one specific thing about this particular card and set. And this actually is a card of Sonny Jim Bottomley, who is probably one of the best first basemen of his era from the 1920s and 1930s St. Louis Cardinals, just prior to the Gas House Gang, which I think they formed in about 1931 or 1932 or so. So he's right at the cusp of the Gas House Gang. And then I'll read an article on his life, which I thought was really fascinating. And so, if you guys haven't seen these particular cards, um, they are kind of rare. You don't really see them too often, and when you do, they're usually found in dog beat condition. This actually is an authentic card. I don't have too many authentic cards in my collection, but when it came to this particular card, I didn't care in what condition it was in. This card is authentic because it is canceled, and they usually will say canceled. Where is it? Right here. Right. It'll usually say canceled on the card, and either the bottom half will be cut off, or in some cases, hole punched. And what the collector did was he sent in the entire set plus the Ivy Andrews, which is the key card to the set, into the company, and then they'd cut off the bottom of the card or hole punch it, send it back to the collector. So I think actually the cards themselves are pretty rare when they came out, and it is because of what I'm going to read to you, and I think you can find it really interesting.
This is from the Boston Globe, October 4th, 1934. Reorganization of Boston firm approved by court. The George C. Miller & Co. Inc. of Boston, prominent candy manufacturing firm, late yesterday became the first business concern in Massachusetts to have its plan of reorganization of the new Section 77B of the Bankruptcy Act approved. The reorganization plan was completed in 6 weeks and was approved by Judge Elijah H. Brewster in the Federal District Court. Claims amounting to $125,000 are eventually to be paid by the company's creditors, it was announced. The new section in the Bankruptcy Act makes possible the reorganization of a company without making it necessary to suspend business pending court action. The Miller firm has 300 employees. Attorney John V. Spaulding, ex-assistant United States attorney, was counsel for the company. A creditors committee was represented by attorney Harry N. Gutterman.
So while I was doing the article for the 1933 George C. Miller set, I actually read the amendments to the Banking Act. I don't recommend doing this at all unless you guys have like a hard time sleeping or something. It's definitely not cool. I can tell you that right now. It's not cool. Not really something that you guys want to say. Oh yeah, by the way, I read the amendment to the Banking Act of 1933. Yeah, your friends, family, they'll think you're kind of crazy, or something. Anyway, so what I thought was actually really interesting about this and why it's actually relevant to the rarity of this particular set is because at the time in 1932-33, the unemployment rate in the country was about 25%. And in some places, I believe it was as high as 45%, depending on the area of the country. And so this, I think, is probably the first time that they actually amended the bankruptcy laws. The bankruptcy laws first started about 1800 and they were repealed in 1803. And then again, they didn't pop up again until like 1841. And that was because there was a quote unquote panic of 1837 under President Van Buren, Martin Van Buren, who people used to call Martin Van Ruin, because the economy was so bad and the banking system was absolutely in shambles. However, it wasn't until much later that they had bankruptcy laws enacted in about, I believe, 1897 or so. So this is actually kind of interesting because we have a lot of statistics on the Great Depression, whereas we don't have too many statistics on any other depressions from like the 19th century. And so we have to kind of like go on specific things that happened then that we had to piece together. So, for example, the Panic of like 1894, that was kind of close to the Great Depression for like 3 years or so. Statistics for like unemployment and stuff didn't actually occur until like 1921, and statistics on the economy specific, that didn't again happen until 21 as well. This is actually kind of interesting too because George C. Miller was able to reorganize instead of have to pay off all of its creditors, and they actually remained in business until about 1969 or so. But the company itself was really difficult to try to track down specific information to it and to these cards themselves. I really don't know any other article that I've read that kind of like lands a cemented case, if you will, to the reason why these cards are so rare. My guess is that they were rare when they were issued in 1933, and the company was on the fritz in the early 1930s, and then by 1934 it was almost gone. And again, George C. Miller, he's a big businessman in Boston, but trying to find information on him wasn't easy as well. So, uh, that happens to be what happened to George C. Miller, and he was lucky. His company was very lucky, and he also operated a business that is kind of weird, Fidelity Chocolates. All right, so that was another business that was connected to George C. Miller, and then he also moved his business a couple of times as well. And you guys can read more about his business and the cards in my article on the company. There's another company though that you guys may be maybe a little more familiar with, and I know you've seen the cards, and that happens to be this card and company right here. 1934 Diamond Star. It's National Chicle, and this company was started by a couple of employees or former employees of Gaudi in 1933-34, and I have another card of Jim Bottomley from the same company, by the way, the Batter Up from 1934 and 1936. Both of these cards are from 1934 through 1936. And I'll show you the backs of these things. As you can see, one's blank, one's not. This says copyright 1935. Some of these cards from 1935 actually have blue ink, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I haven't finished my article on this set, so I'll have to do that at some point. But these cards are blank back, and there's nothing to say that they are actually from National Chickle, but we actually know that they are. I'm not even sure if there's unopened packs, but it's pretty safe to say that both of these sets, obviously, this set is National Chickle. They also went under bankruptcy, and I found an article on their bankruptcy, which I'm going to tell you about right now. This is from the Boston Globe, March 15th, 1937. National Chicle Co. petition to reorganize. The National Chicle Company, Cambridge, filed a petition in the United States District Court today for authority to reorganize under Section 77B of the Bankruptcy Act. The debtor owns and is engaged in the business of manufacturing penny chewing gum, which has a wide distribution in this country. According to a balance sheet attached to the petition, total assets and total liabilities and capital are listed at the same figure, $149,786. Assets include total current assets of $65,831, total fixed assets $78,610, and other assets of 5,343. Liabilities include current liabilities of 105,187, reserve for depreciation 18,995, and total capital stock surplus of 25,603. I'm not entirely sure why National Chicle wasn't able to reorganize under the Banking Act as George C. Miller did. And this company actually did go out of business in 1937. The assets went to Gowdy. They were auctioned off, in fact, and Gowdy got them. And Gowdy actually was under new management in like 1937, 1938 anyway. They almost went under as well. But that's a different story for another time as to why they did. But it's still economic, right? So um, the building that National Chicle was in was at 804 Main Street in Cambridge, and that later was the home of Gum Products Inc., which issued the 1941 double play. And I've talked a lot about that particular set as well. I think that's pretty historic for another reason that has to do with Johnny Mize. Anyway, this is really a tale of two different bankruptcies, and they each go in different directions, which I thought was really interesting. Why one company goes completely bankrupt while another company is allowed to reorganize. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe somebody in the comment could tell me exactly why this is, and may have to do with like assets or how much assets or the company has and its creditors. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but I thought it was really interesting. Now, I also want to tell you guys about Sonny Jim Bottomley here too, because all these cards are of Sonny Jim Bottomley. And this is also, again, a national chickle of Sonny Jim Bottomley. I got it really cheap too. I was like, you know what? I might as well grab this card. I think it was like 20 bucks at the time. These are really kind of interesting cards. And obviously it's all about the photography, with them. But they can get quite rare as well. And one thing I've kind of noticed with both this set right here and well, and this set is the 12 cards in this set, the last series, if you will, and this set, the last series too, are really difficult. Obviously, the last series in the 1934, 36 Diamond Stars are pretty much the same cards, and in 1937, National Chickle, we found at some point, I think in the late 1970s or early 1980s, 1980, I believe, a full sheet of unissued cards that a lot of people say are from 1937. I've actually heard 1936. This is a sheet that the the players are not in the regular series. They were an appendix, if you will, maybe a third series, because on the backs of these cards right here, it says one of 240 major league players. Well, there aren't 240 of these cards, and this may have been a continuation of that. We're not entirely sure. There's still a lot of pieces that need to be filled in this puzzle. The sheet itself is a unique piece. There's only one of them, and it was actually Larry Frisch who printed the cards, which I think is really cool. I love the design of these. Maybe somebody else in the company didn't. We're not entirely sure, and we don't exactly know why these cards were not printed, other than the fact that the company went out of business.
Now, I also want to tell you guys about Sonny Jim Bottomley and his career because I think it's really interesting. I think you guys would have a lot of fun with it. So here we go. This is from the Courier Post, Camden, New Jersey, December 17th, 1932. Reds get Jim Bottomley from Cardinals and swap for pitcher Carroll and outfielder Crabtree. Wheel announces deal in message from New York. No cash is reported to have changed hands. Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Reds today obtained first baseman Jim Bottomley from the St. Louis Cardinals in exchange for pitchers Owen Carroll and outfielder Estelle Crabtree, according to a telephone announcement by President Sidney Wheel of the Reds from New York today. Wheel asserted he made the deal with Branch Rickey, vice president and general manager of the Cardinals, after an all night conference. No money was involved in the trade, Wheel said. Bottomley joined the Cardinals in 1922 after being optioned out to Mitchell of the Dakota League in 1920 and Houston of the Texas League in 1921. He was bought by Syracuse, a Cardinal farm, at the close of the 1921 season and was transferred to the Cardinals in August of that same year. Sonny Jim fell below the 300 batting mark only 2 of the 11 years he spent under Cardinal colors. He hit .296 last year and .299 in 1926. The first year Rogers Hornsby led the Redbirds to the National League pennant and also beat the Yankees in the World Series. All told, Bottomley figured in 4 World Series, taking part in the 1928 and 30 and 31 baseball classics. He will be 33 years old next April. Carroll has had a checkered career since joining the Detroit Tigers fresh from Holy Cross College in 1925. It was rumored at the time he signed that he received $10,000 for appending his signature to a Detroit contract. The Tigers farmed out Carroll to Toronto in 1926, but he came back to the club in 1927 and remained with Detroit till 1930 when he was traded to the Yankees. He was later released by Toledo of the American Association and was bought by the Reds late in the 1930 season. Crabtree was bought from Oklahoma City by Cincinnati in 1928, but played only 1 game the following season, spending the year with Columbus of the American Association. He also was with Columbus in 1930, but was recalled and has been with the club for the last 2 seasons. This is from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, December 13th, 1959. Bottomley funeral tomorrow. Career of Redbird star by Bob Borg. Sonny Jim Bottomley, dead at 59, will be remembered almost as much for a smile and a swagger as for his batting and fielding ability in baseball. The body of the old star is at the Horner Undertaking Establishment at Bourbon, Montana, where it will remain until 10 o'clock tonight. Funeral services will be held at 2 p.m. tomorrow from Horner's in Cuba, Montana. Burial will be at the IOOF Cemetery at nearby Sullivan after Masonic graveside services. Bottomley's widow, the former Betty Bronner, said that if friends desire to make contributions in lieu of flowers, she suggests the Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children or the Heart Fund. Sonny Jim, found dead at the wheel of his car in a parking lot here Friday afternoon, suffered from heart disease and anemia the last several years. Generally regarded as the most outstanding first baseman the Cardinals ever had, Bottomley was also one of the most popular players ever to wear a St. Louis Major League uniform. He played with the Redbirds from 1922 to 1932 and was with the neighboring Browns in 1936 and 1937, managing for the former St. Louis Americans from July through the end of the 1937 season. A smile and a swagger, Bottomley's nickname of Sonny Jim was the most apt because he was a warm, pleasant man whose personality made him especially popular with the women fans. Cap perched jauntily over his left eye. The smiling Bottomley walked with a slow swagger that was as much a trademark as his heavy hitting. A strong, rugged-looking man of 6 feet, 190 pounds, blue-eyed and with chestnut hair that grayed in recent years, he was a left-handed batter who hit for distance, even though he used a slightly choked grip. Bottomley's lifetime batting average for 16 major league seasons was .310. He hit 219 home runs, 31 of them in 1928, when he tried for the National League leadership with the late Hack Wilson. Twice he led the league in runs batted in, 120 in 1926 and 136 in 1928, and his highest average was .371 in 1923. His first full year with the Cards, he hit .367 in 1925, and his .348 mark in 31 missed by a fraction of a point of winning the batting title that went to teammate Chick Haffey. Twice he connected for 6 hits in a game and once belted 7 homers over a stretch of 5 consecutive contests, but his outstanding single performance was an astonishing record that still stands. On September 16, 1924, against Brooklyn, he drove in 12 runs with 6 hits. Bottomley was named Most Valuable Player in the National League in 1928 when he received his award, a $1,000 bag of gold from John Heidler, National League president. More than 10,000 Knothole Gang children attended. In the twilight of his career with the Browns in August 1936, Bottomley was given a day and was asked what he preferred as a gift. Sonny Jim, who owned a farm at Bourbon, Montana, asked for a Jersey cow. They're the best milkers, he said, and was given a bovine named Fielder's Choice in a contest conducted among baseball fans. Other gifts of livestock gave the ballpark a barnyard look that afternoon. The presentation was made to the grinning, graying veteran. Born in Oglesby, Illinois, April 23, 1900, Jim grew up in Nokomis, where his father was a miner and where a younger brother was killed in a cave-in shortly after World War I. By then, Jim, who had worked on a farm and then as a blacksmith's helper at the mines, he started his professional career with Sioux City, Iowa in 1920. He was a pioneer product of the newly conceived farm system that was to lead the Cardinals to 9 pennant winnings, on the first 4 of which he was an important contributor. Down through the years, old Jim, as he referred to himself, had an easy does it demeanor on and off the field, a wit and a philosophy that made him remembered long after he quit playing. For instance, the late Harrison J. Doc Weaver, longtime Cardinal trainer, delighted in repeating the pennant formula of the star first baseman who scoffed at long winning streaks. Doc Jim drawled, just win 2, lose 1, win 2, lose 1. Then one fine day you'll get 100 victories and a pennant. When the Cardinals traded him to Cincinnati in the fall of 1932 for obvious economic reasons and because young Jim Ripper Collins was ready, Bottomley took the blow with characteristic good grace. Notified by a sports writer, Bottomley sighed, "Well, as the missionary said when the cannibal threw him into the stew pot, that's Africa." Although he played before the day of inflated salaries, he earned about $15,000 a season in his prime when dollars went a long way. As a result, when an aching back made him consider retiring, and explosive Larry McPhail at Cincinnati sputtered that Jim couldn't afford to quit, Bottomley snapped, "No, well, I'll bet you $50,000 I can." Bottomley, the eligible bachelor, was married in February 1933 to Miss Betty Bronner, who operated a beauty shop in the Missouri Theater building. The best man was Jim's longtime friend and former roommate, attorney Waldo C. Mayfield, now a St. Louis district judge. The Bottomleys had no children. After managing briefly at Syracuse in 1938 and assisting on the Browns and Cardinals broadcasts in 1939, Bottomley was out of baseball until he became a part-time scout in 1955. Meanwhile, he farmed at Bourbon until deciding health and concern for an aged mother prompted him to return to Nokomis for a time. Briefly during World War II, he was in politics, holding a minor state appointment under a Republican governor. During World War II, Sonny Jim umpired camp ball games at Fort Leonard Wood without charge. Bottomley always delighted in relating how green he was when he reported to the Cardinals in the fall of 1919 at Old Robeson Field. Branch Rickey suggested the 19-year-old newcomer hit some flies to Redbird outfielders. Wide-eyed Bottomley walked to the bat rack, looked over the famous signatures on fat-barreled bats, then blinked as he saw one and was extremely narrow. Addressing Bill Schuettle, Cardinals pitcher, Sonny Jim asked, "Pardon me, sir, but who is this Mr. Fungo?"
So in like July 21, 1937, Sonny Jim Bottomley took over for Rogers Hornsby, who was terminated from a contract that I believe he still had like 2 years left on. The owner of the St. Louis Browns, Donald Barnes, he had just bought the team, in fact, in 1936. And, wherever Rogers Hornsby went, he was a real pain in the neck for really everybody. So I could understand that. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons, or one of the two reasons why Rogers Hornsby was terminated from his contract early. Sonny Jim said that he was gonna keep all of the, Rogers Hornsby's policies in place. And these guys actually they worked together. They were teammates. So Rogers Hornsby said essentially that Sonny Jim Bottomley was a perfect fit. That he was well established, and he approved of it. So that doesn't always make a good manager, though. However, I thought this was really interesting because the photograph or the card on the sheet from 1937, or at least I think it's the 1937 sheet. I've heard 1936. This actually might be from 1936 because Rogers Hornsby is still on the St. Louis Browns at the time. But it's really kind of interesting as to why the National Chickle Sheet from 1937, uh, why it never went into production. And a lot of people think that obviously the bankruptcy had a lot to do with it. Um, we're not entirely sure exactly why, because the dates kind of don't add up. And you have Doc Kramer, who's seen on a Boston Red Sox jersey. He was actually traded to the Red Sox in 1936. It could be 1937, or it could be after the 1936 season. We're just not entirely sure. We also don't know how long production took either. So for Gaudi in 1933, they think that those sets were actually being produced in 1931, 32 or so. And that was, after um, Gordon Gowdy left the company. Obviously, there's holes in this story, so we don't have all the information. And maybe someday we will. I don't know. Everything from the National Chicle Company as a company, I don't know where those documents would be. Maybe at Cambridge City Hall. I could check, but I would take some time. And again, I'm really curious as to why one company was able to reorganize while another one wasn't. And maybe you guys could tell me in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And with that, guys, I will talk to you in another video. I hope you all are doing well, and I obviously want to hear what you guys have to say about Sonny Jim Bottomley or this bankruptcy on uh, our cards, because it did affect these cards quite a bit, I think, as the economy did too. One of the biggest factors in the rarity of uh, cards from the 1930s was the economy, and it really ruined a lot of people's lives too. You had like 5,000 banks fail during the Great Depression. So, anyway, guys, with that, I thank you very much, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.